Nation. I have a phenomenal guest today, one of my fellow compatriots who appeared with me before the Standing Committee on Immigration to address some of the issues the Canadian Immigration Department has had battling this pandemic and how it's impacted the processing and all the systems and everything. And so my guest, Alastair Clarke, is going to be with me in just a few seconds, but tune in. We're going to answer a ton of questions today. So this Immigration Live is all about you guys, except I brought in a heavy hitter to help me to make sure that we've got some awesome information that we're going to share. Immigration lawyer, Alastair Clarke. See you in a second. All right, welcome back to Immigration Nation. I am so grateful to be here, and this is what I live for, you guys. Not only is it inviting people to join me, but just showing the world all of these awesome immigration lawyers that are available to help you navigate this whole process. And what better way to do this than to actually have them come on and show you how smart they are. Okay, well, I can say this because it's my own channel, and Alistair would never say that. But let's bring Alistair on. How are you, my friend?
Hey, Mark. Great to see you again. Thank you.
All right. Oh, look at all these people. Everybody's cheering. This is phenomenal. It's great to have you. Where are you located, Alistair?
So we are in downtown Winnipeg. You can see behind me some of the buildings, and it's balmy weather here in Winnipeg. People here are actually complaining that it's too hot.
Are you serious? It's December in Winnipeg. As you know, I attended law school in Winnipeg at wonderful Robson Hall, the University of Manitoba. And when December hit, boy, I spent the absolute least amount of time possible outside. In fact, I remember I caught the bus from our little apartment in Fort Richmond, and I would time it down to almost the second to when that city bus was driving by. I even jumped a chain link fence, I remember, so that I wouldn't have to run as far because it was so darn cold. But wow, that is amazing. So it's nice and warm now, is it?
Yeah, it's yesterday was +4. A lot of the snow melted, so my kids are complaining that they can't go sledding.
Oh no, that is so strange. Well, Alistair,
you know what's funny?
Please.
So you have connections to Winnipeg because you were at the University of Manitoba Robson Hall, and I grew up in Alberta. So I grew up in Edmonton, just down the highway from you. And so my dad was a professor at the University of Alberta, cool. And so I grew up on campus up there. So we're both prairie boys.
Awesome, that is fantastic. You know, today, Alistair, today's going to be about the viewers. We're going to talk a little bit about our experience, but if you're just tuning in today, we are actually going to answer some questions from the people that are tuning in. So I'm just going to jump over and we're going to bring on a few here. I know I have to move this over down here because I was doing it different the other day. So there's Igor. Igor, you probably know, he's my right arm man here with my office, but I've got some pretty consistent viewers here as well, like Ralph Hansky, who's up in Edmonton. That is where Ralph is. He is like a brother to me. And let's see who else we have tuning in here. We've got Cynthia. Make sure, guys, you post from where you're listening from. I think Alistair would get a kick out of where people are actually tuning in. And so we've got Muhammad, who's looking for a job here, but apparently he's in Dubai. So there you go. Waleed says hello. Hey, and make sure you guys say hello to Alistair as well. Okay, and if you guys have some big questions, remember, do you see the space that we have below us? There isn't a lot of room to fit in all of your big questions. So keep them concise. Gurpreet, I can see you've got some questions, and Prabhjit as well. But keep them a little bit. We're going to do a little bit of an introduction. Then we're going to get to all of your questions. Okay. Oh, here we go, Ameka. Ameka right here. You are in Canada, my friend. This is awesome. Okay, Alistair, he's an expired Copr right there. He is one of the guys who was stuck outside in Nigeria forever. I remember Ameka there, Mashi. I'm so happy for you, my friend. That is just fantastic. Okay, wait a minute. Wait a minute. This is what you're going to get, my friend. There we go. Oh, I've been waiting for that news. I'm so happy for him. This Emeka's been waiting, like, I don't know, it's probably been 2 or 3 years since I've known him. That is so awesome. I was actually just talking about to one of my associates today. There's a reporter who's looking for people who, for their stories, they want to write a story on the impact of COVID on processing and everything. And I was thinking of you, Emeka, but unfortunately you're here now. So congratulations. That is awesome. Okay, let's see where everybody else is tuning in. We've got Ansha, who's over in Delhi. Sunny's over in Delhi as well. And to put this into context, Alistair, we're talking like just about 4 a.m. right now. These fine folks over on the other side of the world. That is where they're tuning in from. So very cool. Oh, here we go. We got some shout outs for you. Yep. We've got Gurpreet over in Charlottetown. Cool. Excellent. Okay, Assad's over in Pakistan. Sunny says a shout out to Alistair as well. See, it's important that you feel welcome. This is what it's all about. And there's Amit. And Sunny says he's waiting for PR for a long time. Well, you talk to Emeka there, Sunny, and he'll tell you exactly how long he had to wait too. So, yep, you're very welcome, my friend. It has been an absolute pleasure working with you. Okay, well, we get a few shout outs, and that's great. So let's just flip back here, and we're gonna just chat a little bit about something that Alistair and I had a privilege of going through. And that was this right here. And actually, there's Alistair's website, which we'll get to in a little bit. But right here, this Citizenship and Immigration, this Standing Committee on Immigration. And Alistair, why don't you talk a little bit about this? What happened?
So yeah, so first of all, it was my first experience giving testimony to the SIM, and it was a great experience. So the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration has been around for as long as I can remember. I was invited to give testimony when they were reviewing the medical inadmissibility in 2016 and 2017, but at that time it meant flying to Ottawa, and so I couldn't go. And then I was invited way back in like 2012. I think when Kenny was minister, but again, it had to be in Ottawa, and so I couldn't go. And so this was just such a great opportunity to be able to give testimony here from Winnipeg and do it by video, and to talk to the MPs who are, I mean, these are politicians, right? And so they're to a certain extent learning about the system, but they're really well-meaning individuals. They want to hear from experts. They want to hear from people who have been affected by the system, by the department, by IRCC officers, by CBSA officers to a certain extent, and they want to hear, experiences so that they can provide recommendations, and that will hopefully either lead to policy changes or possibly even legislative changes. And it was just a great experience.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. It was my first time as well appearing, and I think the most difficult part was getting my opening statement down to 5 minutes. And I think if you guys, in the comments below, you can click on it and you can either watch, or there's a transcript and you can just search my name and Alistair's and you can get everything that we said. I was going to post maybe ask you, Alistair, to post your speaking notes, but they all have it there with the transcript, so there's no need for it. But that was one of the more challenging things. And I'll let you in on a little secret. I don't know if I told you this, but yeah, I probably did. But I had my teleprompter up, so right over the screen, so I was able to just kind of look and read, and then as it scrolled down, I knew as long as I kept up with the words going down that I wouldn't run out of time. And but you, my friend, are more of a professional. See, you're easily able to gauge your time, and yeah, so you guys gonna have to listen about the things that Alistair and I, we talked about. And I guess what were some of the high points, Alistair, that you pointed out, like some of the issues that really immigration needed to look at in your in your opening? We'll give the audience a little teaser.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I went through 7 drafts because if you look at meetings at the SIM, the chairperson is brutal with the time constraints. When you hit that 5-minute mark, she's like, thank you, Mr. Clarke. You're done. Moving on.
Boom. It's like a
boom.
hard, yeah.
Cut off. They don't even let you finish your sentence.
No.
So I had a timer. I timed myself many times. I wanted to get in all of my points. But you know, one of the points that you mentioned, and one of the points that I've mentioned, and one of the points that has been mentioned by many witnesses, was the updating to the online portal, or just you know, IRCC or CBSA using more online tools. And as you know, they just announced $72 million or something to do that. It's probably going to take them a while. You know, as you know, when we moved from CAPES to GCMS, it took ages and ages. But the fact that they've committed now, 72 whatever millions of dollars to do this, you know, maybe they were listening. Imagine that.
Yeah. Well, I know one of the biggest issues is the modernization of the entire immigration system. And critical to that is electronic filing. And most of the people, the pain and suffering that they experienced was because they were in queues where it was a paper-based application, whether it was spousal sponsorships. And we heard, like, you can go back and watch testimony from other meetings that are all discussing the impact of COVID on immigration systems. And, you know, whether it's the COPR folks that had their expired ones like Emeka, you know, or Ojo, David Ojo, I think his name was, who appeared in one of the first meetings before us, before the standing committee. But a lot of these people, it's because the visa offices were closed and it was a paper based. They, you know, the visas, there needed to be an actual.
Because of the pandemic, it just makes everybody it just adds a whole nother level of stress.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's give a few shout outs here. We've got Pedro from Brazil. Oh, muito bem, Pedro. Bem-vindo. So I don't speak too many other languages, Alistair, but I do speak Portuguese. So when I get these guys who come on and from Brazil, I definitely have to give them a shout out. But then we also have Amit, who's over in Toronto. And so shout out to Amit. And like I said, hold your questions for just a little bit. And we're going to go through a few more things. And then we're going to open it up. Boom. And we're going to be available to answer whatever you throw at us. All right. Okay. So flipping back, Alistair. So obviously the modernization of the system, what else did you cover? What else was important to you?
Yeah, well, and this is something that Chantal Delage also mentioned was, you know, with dealing with 179 of the regs and refusals for TRVs, you know, Canada has a very high refusal rate for TRVs. And in my view, the decisions made by visa officers are quite inconsistent in how they look at applications, and it's very frustrating. One of the things that she mentioned, and so I wanted to reiterate this, is it's very easy for us to appeal those decisions to federal court and have them overturned. But it's so much time and energy and expense on behalf of the client for us to do that, and it's so frustrating that we need to create a better system. And so what I said was the request for reconsideration system is broken, that often MPs are used as a type of reconsideration to have them kind of act on behalf of clients, especially where you've got a very sympathetic case and it's very clear that the officer made a mistake to get them involved. But that's not their job. I mean, honestly, MPs' offices, you know, right now they have every office that I know, they have staff that are dedicated to immigration files. And I mean, it's an MP. They're supposed to be doing the work of all of the constituents. And certainly immigration is important, and that's great. But they dedicate such a huge amount of time based on the mistakes and the inconsistency of the decisions by visa officers. And I think their time could be better spent.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm going to flip over just to the website again and just give a shout out to this group here. So this is one of the groups that I've had contact with, the Spousal Sponsorship Advocates. And it's interesting, because of the pandemic, these issues have been exacerbated. In other words, because nothing was happening with these paper-based applications for months and months and months, it unduly prolonged the whole processing. And when you're in Canada, you know, an in Canada sponsorship, all right, you're together at least. But when you're separated, and this group, that has over 5,000 members right now, they're an example of those who have been caught in this, the consequences of having a paper-based system. Like, why do we even have, like, realistically, why do we even have visas imprinted in passports? Like, why? And I know there's discussion about, okay, what else is holding things back, the biometrics and things like that. But the reality is, why can't they be just done at the port of entry? Why can't we just do away with work permits and study permits, the actual documents that are imprinted in the passports? Although I will say that our new work permit, that form is pretty attractive. It's actually a pretty nice looking document compared to
I like the graphics that they updated.
Yeah, it's quite attractive. I don't know how much money we spent into creating that thing, but compared to the one that I'd issue on the border when I worked on as an officer, that have the feel of steel, to test whether they're authentic, these bland documents. So yeah, those are positives, but groups, like the spousal sponsorship advocates, and I just want to let them know, I'm going to flip back here again, that we feel for them as we feel for all of these individuals who've been, separated because of the pandemic. And it's been a cruel, heartless process. And so, so a big shout out to them, and understand that we hear them. And like you said, Alistair, it would be great if there was this concept of like a spousal super visa, right? Where, if you are kind of in limbo, how much fraud really exists? How much of an issue really is it that immigration is struggling with? Why they're so reluctant to grant, a visitor visa for someone who's the subject of a spousal sponsorship? The reality is the regulations allow for it, right? Section 22, I think it is, in the Act allows for dual intent, but yet, officers, they've got a tremendous amount of discretion, and there are systemic issues. Oh, you've got a spousal sponsorship, therefore, nope, I'm not going to approve it, because there's no way you're actually going to go back to India if I grant this visa. You're going to stay in Canada with your spouse. Like, it's just, anyways. So, any more thoughts on that topic?
Well, I will say that the new kind of fiance visa that they've opened up has been nice. So I think to a certain degree, the IRCC has been listening, and we've actually got a couple clients who have arrived through that visa, which is good. Before, we would submit applications where it was a fiance relationship, and we would see the GCMS notes, and the officer would literally describe in GCMS, they would say boyfriend or girlfriend. They wouldn't even recognize that it was a fiance relationship. It was as though, for them, a fiance is exactly the same as a boyfriend and girlfriend, and they didn't see any additional commitment between the couple.
Now, Alistair, can you take a step back and just talk about this? Because I think some people will get confused, and they'll say, oh, there's a new visa for fiancés. What's the application process? I think we might slip down that slope. Can you talk a little bit more about that and give some context to it?
So this is so right now with the travel restrictions and quarantine, it's an IRCC. I guess it's an IRCC authorization for exclusive dating relationships, I think is the words that they're using. But if you look at the details of the document, IRCC has specifically identified it for fiancés. And so they've basically recognized that where Canadians or permanent residents in Canada can't get married because of the travel restrictions, they're allowing the foreign nationals to come to Canada based on their relationships and based on their plans to get married.
Now, what experience do you have, like, in terms of geographic region? So I can see you've got an American fiance and you're coming up to Canada. Yeah. Like, obviously you don't need a formal visa, but the ability to enter and to overcome the travel restrictions and all those kinds of things, or maybe even from the UK or a visa exempt country. But what about India? Let's say Nigeria, let's say one of these countries. Like, do you have any experience with how they're treating them? Because if we flip back here once again to the spousal sponsorship advocates, what they're saying is, good grief, you're facilitating fiancés, but you're screwing me over. Like, I'm a married spouse. We've been separated. There is no issues with whether or not this relationship is genuine, ongoing, committed, centralized mode of existence, but for the fact we're separated, why are we not being prioritized versus these fiancés? So in that circumstance, like, what's your thoughts on that? A little bit of a double standard.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, let me just talk about one example. So we had a Ukrainian woman who has been engaged to a Canadian gentleman for about 2 years. They had plans to come to Manitoba to get married. She even had a flight. She had a plane ticket to fly at the end of March from Ukraine to Winnipeg, and of course, here we go with the pandemic. It was all canceled. So she had a visa. So she had, Ukrainian citizens need a TRV to enter Canada, and she had that. But with the pandemic, she was not allowed. And then when this fiance visa, when this exclusive dating relationship program opened up, they gave us a call, said, okay, I looked at it, perfect, great candidates. And the processing time was 5 days. So we submitted it, got the authorization, and she arrived last week.
Wow. Yeah. Crazy. And and you know what, those avenues, those are positive developments. Without a doubt, those are positive. Okay. Let's shift gears here. Let's pull some of these people in who've been patiently waiting. And the fun part is that I get to look at this in advance, and Alistair really doesn't. So he doesn't know what I'm going to throw up there. So I won't hang him out to dry too much. We'll see if he's interested in answering some of these. You can see, make sure that your questions, you guys, are not too big, because it will take too long to read them. And if it borderlines on this, that means that this question is so specific that it only relates to you, and you actually need to go right over here. And if you go right to Alistair's site right here, the contact, that's where you need to book a consult with Alistair's website, through his website, and connect with him. Man, this is a really nice website. I'm impressed with this thing, Alistair. This is great. Like, who's your webmaster? I need to maybe connect with them. This
Julio,
is a good
he's great. Yeah,
this is really nice. Yeah, big kudos to the site. And the best part of this, you guys, is that, so here's Alistair's contact information. You can just submit your name, email, and message there, and they'll get back to you right away. But the best part about all of this right here is that there is substance behind the website. And there are so many nameless and faceless sites out there. They look great, but there's no substance behind in terms of what they offer for support. And half the time you don't even know who's representing you. So, and I guess I better shift back to the proper screen here so that we can see this properly. So what I'm going to do here now is, because of this, we're going to answer some questions. Well, Jasmine,
Mark,
yes.
Just before we get too deep, I just want to give you a shout out, because Mark, look, I have to say, you talk a mile a minute and you're great, but I have to give you a shout out for this channel. And you are amazing, my friend. It is my privilege to be on here. You should show your own website and all of the content that you have put up. I mean, I subscribe to your channel, and this is all free. You give away free legal advice. You are, a Canadian licensed lawyer, and you're giving away all of this free information and advice to anyone around the world. And I know you've said before that, that you want to basically put out a business, all of the agents outside of Canada that are taking advantage of the system. And here we're able to reach everyone around the world through your channel. And I just want to say, to everyone listening, that Mark is a treasure. He's a Canadian treasure. And that this YouTube channel and everything you're doing is just, I'm serious. It is such a resource. And I don't think people understand what a great resource this is. So go to your own website and
Alistair, how obviously everybody gets uncomfortable with people, as we say in Canada, tooting their horn, but the reality is
I'll do it for you.
Yeah, well, then that's what I love about this most. As immigration lawyers, we rarely do this kind of stuff. Like, we don't. It's not professional. And the best part is, oh, actually, I'm going to show you this, and we'll get to your question here, Jasmine, but I just want to show Alistair something, and all of you that are watching, this is why. This is a classic example. So I'm going to open up my, actually, do you know what? Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to show this site. This is the fun part, Alistair. I can dance around. I can do a whole bunch of different things. I'm going to pull up HoltheLaw.com right here. And I finally figured out for a virtual firm, oh, that's not what I wanted. I'm going to have to go back here. I want to pull it up on Google, Holthe Law, Holthe Immigration Law. There, that should work. So I finally figured out how to get Google reviews now. So we push people here. But if we go in here, I'll show you something. And this is my personal favorite. So let's go down to Sam. So I'm not sure who Sam is. I don't recall ever having a consult with him. But yeah. Sam indicated here that he booked a consult with me, asked a few specific questions. He was beating around the bush, not qualified to answer my questions. If he is that good, why he needs a Facebook page and promote his law firm? Good lawyers don't have even time to promote anything. So I show that, and the reason I show that is because for lawyers, this is the perception, right? The perception is that, well, if you're so good, why do you need to advertise, right? And so the difference with what we're doing here, and like I said, I don't even know who Sam is, and obviously he's never even reached out to me. I suspect, as one of my other viewers last in my live Q&A on Wednesday said, he's probably someone who's just who's there to drive down the rating. But anyways, the whole concept of a lawyer going out and doing what we're doing right now, giving away free information, answers, is just unfathomable. That's what we charge for, right? Like, why would you do it? But you pointed out one of the main reasons. It's because there's so much misinformation out there, and people just don't know who they can trust. And it never ceases to amaze me how often people will take advantage of their own countrymen, whether that's a consultant, whether that's agents overseas. And, and I guess to some extent, I'm sure there's lawyers out there who've been guilty of doing the same thing. Fortunately, we have law societies that are going to crush them, like our unfortunate friend Paul Hess in Manitoba, right? And, where there's just like there's big stuff that's going on, but that's why the law societies are there, to protect people. But my goal in creating this and sharing the information is to educate people so that they know when this agent or consultant they're hiring knows what they're talking about, and when they don't, they can call them out on it and make sure they're not throwing their money away. So
yeah, that's a really good point. Actually, it's a nice segue. I'll tell you right now, I am dealing with a similar situation. We got a Google review, a 1-star Google review. And this was a person, they put in a description of what happened. And I talked to my staff, and we have no client that meets that description of what happened. Yeah. So, we went around, we said, oh, maybe they got confused. So we eventually figured out who it was. We contacted them, and there is an agent who is using my name and using my firm. And we got a copy of the contract from this agent that has my information all over it. And this individual thought that they had spoken with me and thought that we had been retained and thought that they sent us money. And we had to track them down. And so now it's a police investigation.
Where's the person located or allegedly located? This other
Nigeria. So the client is in Nigeria. The contract has an address in Mississauga. I think I posted on the CBA listserv. I think you might have seen this.
Wow.
So the contract has an address in Mississauga with our information on another page of this contract. And so there's a CBSA criminal investigations going on about this. Winnipeg Police Service, they're contacting the Peel Region Police in Mississauga. But I will say the police officer, the sergeant that I spoke to at the Winnipeg Police Service, I mean, he basically said, look, that Mississauga address is probably a fictional address. Who knows where these people are? But what the giveaway was that when we finally contacted them, they said that they transferred funds via WhatsApp. And as you know, with the law society rules, we can't really get money through WhatsApp. That's
Yeah.
totally against the rules. So we absolutely knew that they were not our
Wow.
clients, and we never had any contact with them, and that there was
Wow.
something really fishy going on.
Wow. I had not even considered that. And you know what, as we get out there, yeah, that makes perfect sense that you know, that imposter situation could arise. I never even thought of that. Well, there you go. Well, hopefully, Sam, if you think you actually did talk with me, well, send me an email, because I take a 1-star rating very seriously. It means that I failed somehow in my clients. And if we're truly professing to have a client first mentality, where my firm, our motto is, you know, is client centered, firm supported, which that 1-star rating is like a slap in my face that you're a hypocrite, Mark, if you're not actually following up with what your mission of your firm is. And so I take those things very seriously. Okay, we have spent a lot of time chatting about this, but let's get back to Jasmine here. So Jasmine says, hey, hi, Mark and Alistair. I'm based out of Seattle, and I just received my passport request for confirmation of PR. I'm unable to do a soft landing over the next 6 months. Can I request an extension? So this one right here is really, really, really close to this right here. But here's the situation. We're going to talk about this generally. So not specifically, Jasmine. So this is borderline kind of a specific question for you. You'd really need to book a consult for us to talk about all the ins and outs. But generally speaking, there's a couple things that you need to understand. Obviously, with the travel restrictions, there is still a policy in place that states if your confirmation of permanent residence is expiring, you can notify immigration that you're unable to travel because of the pandemic, and that you fully intend to travel in the future once the pandemic is lifted and the travel restrictions and everything. And if you're in Seattle, yes, you technically can come. The travel restrictions don't bar you from that standpoint from coming, but there are a whole bunch of other reasons, safety, that you can rely on if truly you're not able to travel. And so you can notify them, and you can have the ability to have that extended. Now, if you talk to Emeka and some of the other friends who were stuck in that situation, understand if you do that and you're unable to travel, and you choose, you make a choice that you're not able to travel, you notify IRCC and your COPR expires, then you're at their mercy. And it's not like you can just decide, hey, I'm ready to travel tomorrow, because some of these individuals have been waiting months and months, and we don't know what the future's, what the future is going to hold. Alistair, do you have anything to add to that?
That's a great reply, Mark. The only thing that I would add is that I think the key words of this comment is I'm unable to do so, because it doesn't provide the reasons. And what I tell the clients over and over again is that you need to keep in mind that officers are people too, and I have so many friends who are officers, CBSA officers, IRCC officers. They're generally very reasonable people, but they read the reasons. They want to see that it is a reasonable situation, and they want to see why it is that you're not able to comply. And so you put that explanation together. My guess is that it's probably got a very good chance of being approved. But the key point here is, why are you unable to land?
Yeah. And to make sure that you link it back to the pandemic, because in the past, before the pandemic, boy, it was going to take some pretty unbelievable experience or barrier that's outside of your control for them to ever consider, allowing any kind of an extension on a COPR, let alone after it's expired, requesting a passport and reviving it. But the key here with the policy is that it's tied and linked to this pandemic. So that's where you go, Jasmine.
And Jasmine doesn't mention the pandemic in the comment.
Yep. Yeah. And that's important. So yeah. Sorry, Alistair, continue. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it could be something. I mean, this question could have been a question from 2 years ago. And it would be a very similar reply.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's flip over here. So here we have Akansha says, what status to put when a divorce is in progress, and what documents would be required to produce when an ITA comes? So this is the context of an express entry. And would this increase the timeline compared to other profiles? So this is a question about express entry. So Akansha is in the midst of a divorce. Now, we don't know hear from this if the divorce papers have actually been submitted, if it started, that plays a role in how we answer this. But if truly you are legally separated, then that's what you indicate in your application form. If you indicate that you're married, then they will require all of that other supporting document for your spouse. And I have to imagine that they're not going to be terribly cooperative with you in the midst of a marital breakdown. So as far as what you put in terms of status, it would be legally separated is probably the direction you would go, if you can actually prove. And one of the things I always look at for my clients is have you actually submitted? Have you filed the petition for divorce in your jurisdiction, because we use that? Or if you're in a country that has the concept of legal separation, which Alistair, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but even in Canada, there isn't really this concept of a formal, legal separation where you get a document back, right? It's just a statement of fact. And so, anything else to add to that one?
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to say. And we filed many applications with legally separated as the marital status. In Canada, family law is provincial, so the laws in Manitoba are slightly different from the laws in Alberta, but generally the same principles. And we don't have anything in Manitoba that, like, any certificate from the Department of Vital Statistics here that would prove that you are legally separated. What we often do is we just do a statutory declaration that just describes the breakdown of the relationship and puts the exact date of separation in there to show the details to establish that the client meets the definition of legally separated.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, let's jump over to this one from Amro. He says, "Hey, our respected lawyers." Oh my goodness, that deserves this right here. Look at that. Awesome. "Can I submit about to expire police certificates this month from a country which I last resided in 3 years ago?" So the question, I think, Amro, that you're asking here, and that you should be, or at least the information that we need, is if it's a soon to be expired, if you have obtained that certificate after you have left that country, then those police certificates don't technically expire. So if you were recently there, but you've said that you last resided 3 years ago, then if the document itself has an expiry date, it doesn't really mean much for IRCC. The key is if you're still living in that country. Anything to add, Alistair, on that one?
Yeah, and I don't know when you were an IRCC officer, Mark, if you dealt with that, because before they were much more strict with police clearance certificates, and you would have to get a new police clearance certificate every year over and over, and it was a lot of time and a lot of energy. And they changed the policy, correct me if I'm wrong, it's like 5 to 7 years ago. And they've made it much more flexible. And so, just like you said, I mean, if that PCC was issued after they no longer resided in that jurisdiction, then generally speaking, the IRCC officer will accept it.
Yeah, and one advice too that I'll give you, Amro, is that if you have an ability to easily get a new one, just get a new one. Right? You don't need to take any chances. But from a legal standpoint, and will also qualify here, this is express entry for sure, which I'm assuming is probably the route that you're looking at. Yeah, your police certificate, if you obtained it after you left that country, then it doesn't have an expiry date, at least in terms of immigration policy.
Yeah.
So,
police clearance certificates, depending on the country you're dealing with, can be extremely difficult to obtain. I know I've had clients who have resided in Kuwait, and oh my goodness, it is a nightmare to get police clearance certificates from some countries.
Yeah, it can be really, really painful. So, okay, let's flip over here to Amna, and I'll let you take a stab at this one, Alistair, first. I'll just read it off.
She says, "Hi, Mark."
Oh, no, she actually meant Alistair, really. I think she just mistyped. She says, "Hi, Mark, hope you're good." See, she just is greeting me. So my husband is a Canadian citizen, and he sponsored me in 2019, and I'm still waiting for my PR. So should I apply for a TRV?
Wow. So there we go. We're getting right to section 179 of the regs, getting back to our SIM testimony.
Yeah.
So this is where we've got the spousal sponsorship in process, and the couple are apart, which is just so sad. I
Yeah.
mean, Section 3 of the Act, talking about the objectives of the legislation, talks about family reunification,
Yep.
and it's built right into the legislation, and yet couples are separated for long periods of time while their applications are in process. So what I would say to Amna is so you can apply for a TRV, but you need to invoke the dual intent provision, and it needs to be very clear that you've got that spousal sponsorship in process, and that you have the intention of being PR in the future, but in your TRV application, you're asking for temporary residence status only, and that you've got that dual intention of applying for both status as a temporary resident, but also keeping in mind in the future that you may be a permanent resident.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. Now, Amna, if you were to say I'm coming from India, I would give you about a 95% chance that your TRV is going to be refused. That's kind of the world that we're in. And when I talk about the that Facebook group here, if I flip back, and I keep giving them shout outs because they deserve it. They've done a bunch of work, and there's a lot of members that are affected by this, but that's one of the issues that people are really, really struggling with, is the fact that, fine, if processing times are going to be, astronomical, that's completely outside of our control. But in some cases, Alistair, I'll also tell you that there's this concept, and we experienced it with our clients, the Mooths, that are all over, matter of public record now, a part of the evidence that I even gave to the standing committee with their adoption of their Nigerian daughter. There's this sentiment. It's a deep-seated sentiment within the department, that people have to, there's a certain period of suffering that you just have to go through, and that's just the way it is. And so for spousals in some countries, we look back historically, Alistair, some countries you could wait 3 or 4 years, or more. And so if you somehow are at the 1 year mark, and maybe for you, Amna, 2019, I don't know if that's January or December, but still it's a long time. There's this sentiment in some regions, Africa in particular, where everything is just slow, and it's almost dehumanizing. It's almost, when the processing happens, it's like, well, you're just like all the other 2,000. And so if everybody is suffering equally, somehow that's right. And that's just reasonable. But no, we feel for you, and there's nothing stopping you from applying for the TRV. Nothing. You address the things that Alistair's talked about, and and whether it's you or anyone, we would give the same information. There's nothing stopping you, but you need to be able to find some way to articulate how and demonstrate that you meet the standard of showing that you have a reason to return back to your home country. And and when you're in the context of being sponsored for permanent residence by your Canadian citizen spouse, it's a steep threshold to meet.
Yeah, and just a couple of other points there. I would also just caution Emna that if she is granted the TRV and she comes to Canada so that she can be with her Canadian citizen spouse, she may have to return to her country of origin for an interview. And sometimes those letters requesting interviews don't give you a lot of notice for those interviews, so she should be aware of that. And I've seen, and officers generally, they're very, once a visa officer has carriage of the application, you can't just move it to another officer. So you can't say, oh, suddenly, I'm in Manitoba now.
Yeah.
Can I have my interview in Winnipeg? The answer will be no. They'll say, no, you've got to head back to Delhi, or you've got to go to, Nairobi or wherever to have your interview done at that visa office, where the visa officer is going to be making a decision on your application. So she should be aware of that. And then the second point that you mentioned you're talking about a genuine marriage test. And it's kind of funny because, part of that genuine marriage test, they're looking at, cohabitation and the amount of time that you spend together. Well, you're not able to spend time together because the Canadian immigration system is not
Designed to keep you
allowing them
apart.
to be
Yeah.
together. Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
and then at the same time, they might question the genuineness of the marriage
Yeah.
because they're
Yeah.
not able to be together. Well, whose
Yeah.
fault is that?
Yeah. It's a vicious circle. It really, really is. And, this is another call for the modernization of the system. And we do know, we have had reports now that they are doing interviews, that are virtual. So, from that standpoint, though, the concept of then even making them travel back, it's almost punitive. And so, all we can say, Amna, is good luck, and you'll have to just take your chances and and see how it plays out. But one thing we do know is that applying for a TRV is not going to impact negatively on your PR application. So if you apply and it gets refused, it's not like it's going to harm, the genuineness assessment of your relationship. In fact, sometimes I tell my clients, if you apply and it gets refused, well, I'm going to include it in the submission. But for you, immigration, blocking my clients from getting together and this foreign spouse from coming to meet the family of the sponsor, well, you can't blame them for it. So we'll often address that actually in the submissions of our spousal sponsorships. Okay, let's flip over here. This is an interesting one. So Gateway Portugal. I don't know who this person is, but man, we got to connect. So I think, Alistair, I don't know if I told you that I spent 2 years in Portugal serving a mission for my church. That's where I learned to speak Portuguese, was in Portugal. So, okay, let's see what this Gateway Portugal has to say. So, misrepresentation. So misrepresentation in another country in the EU. So this individual applied, and for some reason, they either made an error, mistake, or hopefully this individual didn't willfully misrepresent something. But anyways, that was the finding. So what could be done for a Canadian visitor visa? It has passed more than 6 years now. So what are your thoughts on that and the effect that a misrep in another country, and remember, these aren't one of our partner countries. It's not New Zealand, Australia, the US, or the UK, where Canada has these information sharing agreements, but with another country in the EU, like what effect? Obviously, it goes without saying that the person has to disclose. That if the question is asked, you have to disclose. But what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah. So what I say over and over in these types of situations is, so like you said, you have to disclose. And the number one problem that I see is where people, let's say, try to get away with not disclosing, and the lying about it, or it's misrepresentation of not disclosing it is the harsher or the more serious action than the previous action. Now, we don't have any details of exactly what happened, more than 6 years ago, and how or why this individual got stuck in a situation where they misrepresented. So there are some question marks there. But generally speaking, it's much more serious if you don't disclose, and rather than just disclosing and providing an explanation.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because we're dealing with people all over the world who want to come to Canada, and I see this a lot. I know that I don't have a prayer of coming. My human capital isn't enough, or there's just something that's just a barrier to me and just my background. Maybe I don't have the right work experience. Maybe I don't own property. Maybe I don't have those ties. And so there's this concept overseas, which is just so damaging, that people will look at it this way, Alistair. They'll say, well, you know what? If I submit this fraudulent document and it gives me a chance of getting to Canada, well, if I'm found out and misrepresentation has been found and I'm given a 5-year bar, well, I wasn't going to Canada anyways, right? This is, I'm no worse off than before. And so because of this twisted kind of mentality, and I don't need a code of professional conduct to tell me that I'm going to advise my clients to always tell the truth. And sometimes that truth could very well result in a visa being refused. And if this individual does indicate that that they had been found to have misrepresented on a visitor visa application, there's no doubt that it's going to have an impact on the application. It will, right? but never under any circumstance do you ever want to misrepresent. And here's why. You may misrepresent and get through and get your visa approved. But if you want to have a chance of staying permanently or applying through another like that, well, you're going to have to perpetuate that lie throughout everything. And eventually it can come back to bite you. And I think you've seen it yourself, Alistair, same as me, where clients have come to us and then they say, well, how do I fix this? Oh, boy, I can tell you, in some cases, I tell them, you know what, this is going to be unbelievably damaging. And all of the thousands, $100,000 you spent to go to school here, when you disclose this, it could, unravel everything. And then you're going back and, you've got a nice experience here in Canada, but if you had addressed it in the beginning, maybe you wouldn't have been able to come, but you wouldn't have lost all these years going down a path that eventually is going to end up in a brick wall. So really, really difficult, really, really challenging situation.
I had a similar situation involving a gentleman who applied for a study permit and it was refused. And then he hired an agent, and the agent said to him, the reason why it was refused is because you don't have the work experience or past education to that connects you with this study program in Canada. So the agent created fraudulent documents, including a fraudulent degree or certificate, in order to show that the study program in Canada made sense. The agent submitted all this information on his behalf, and it was approved. So he got the study permit, and he's here now. But now he wants to apply for PR. And when you apply for PR, you need to produce transcripts. You need to produce a whole bunch of other documents. And, the agent didn't give him transcripts, and he's not going to be able to continue with this. And so at this point, he can't get PR.
Yep. And this is where there's this old song by Roy Rogers, and I can't remember who the lady is. Like, we're talking my grandfather's time, called Happy Trails. And they're singing Happy Trails to you. And that basically, you're on your way out. There's just no, you once you've said one lie, then you're going to be forced to tell that same lie over and over and over again. And the only solution, I guess, that I would say is just, if you want to be honest in the beginning, but if somehow you've been induced to misrepresent in any way, at the earliest opportunity, disclose that and try to correct the record. And then sometimes you have to throw yourself at the mercy of the officer and hope that, they're going to be understanding. And for that reason, Alistair, I'm actually very, very grateful that officers do have discretion, right? They do have an ability to choose how they wish to proceed. And if your hands, like we learned in law school, if you come with clean hands, you have a greater, access to the law of equity. But if you don't, then understand you can't really ask for discretion if you're not coming with clean hands, doing things right. All right.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And just one more point on that. The definition of misrepresentation is very broad. So direct or indirect, including omissions, including any information that was submitted on your behalf, even by a shady agent. It's a very broad section, and it is very common. It is misrepresentation is one of those sections that officers always have in the back of their minds, and that if they're going to catch you in that, they can exercise their discretion if you have a good explanation, but you better have a good explanation.
You bet. Okay, we'll finish off. We're actually over the 1 hour mark here. Well, we're really close to it. We're going to answer 2 more questions here, then we'll wrap it up. So what's your prognostication with this one here, Alistair? So we've got an upcoming draw, predictions for CEC, Canadian Experience Class in Canada. He's sitting at Vishal's sitting at 457. We don't care about the knock. That's irrelevant. We know that that's skilled. But he's sitting at about a 457. So what do you think? Think if they did a CEC only draw, that it would drop down to 457? We've saw what's happened with the open draws when they've had these massive cohorts of like 5,000, in the last 2 draws. It's pushed it down to 469, which I never would have expected it to drop below 470 with all of the, pressure. But what do you think about all these people inside Canada? I think it was 455 or 454 the last CEC draw was for Canadian Experience class. What do you think? We're guessing here.
I don't like to make these guesses. It's there's a pool. They take the strongest candidates from the pool. It's so unpredictable. You don't know how many they're going to be taking at each draw. You're competing against other members of the pool. 457 is very borderline. It's possible. You never know.
Yeah. And that's really what I tell most people. I say, look, we can go back and take a look at what the past draws have been, but it's been a long time since we had a CEC only since the summer. So that means all of those people that have been ranking below 469 that have Canadian work experience, including the students that have graduated, those who've got their postgrad that have completed the 1 year, they're getting that bump up of 40 or 35 points, depending on if they're married or not. And then we have the French speakers, the Francophone, who are now getting those bonus points. So we're just not sure what impact they're having on the in-Canada applicants. And with the PNPs being a little bit more strict right now, more people, higher demand. If they were to do another CEC draw, like only a CEC draw, I would say it'd be around 460. That's my guess. But if they did this massive draw of 10,000 people, well, then that plays a role too, and it could very well drop down. So there's the prognostication, which you can put absolutely no weight in it other than us just trying to guess. Okay,
well, the only
go ahead.
The only point there is IRCC has published, very high numbers for 2021, 2022. They really want to push immigration. They want to bring lots of skilled workers here. They want to bring people to Canada. They understand that immigration is really the backbone of this country. And we need immigrants to continue this economic growth. So who knows? If they want to meet those numbers, they're going to be pulling a lot of people through the pool.
Yeah, absolutely they are. Okay, we'll finish off with the legal question. It's a pretty simple one, but we'll address it. So this one is from Amit, and he says, why can't we appeal in Canada spousal sponsorships? Now, I'm assuming a refusal of an in Canada sponsorship. So, Alistair, why can't Amit appeal a refusal on an in Canada spousal?
That's a good question. Okay, so historically, spousal sponsorships were restricted where the applicants were outside Canada. And when they created the spouse or common law partner in Canada class application, it's actually a two-part application. You're doing an H&C application with a spousal sponsorship application. And because of that, because it's got that H&C component to it, you don't have the right of appeal to the Immigration Appeal Division for the refusal. That's my short answer. Mark, what am I missing?
No, that's exactly it. And you think about it, Amit, like they are always mindful of marriages of convenience and fraud. And, and often when there is this new program or carrot that's opened up, this new possibility, especially remember, Amit, that there's also the deferral policy. If you have an application submitted in Canada, they will defer removal until a decision is made. All of these things were all created to help facilitate. But they also want to create a little bit of an incentive for people too. So if you choose to file in Canada, then you better be darn sure that your marriage, you can prove the genuineness of it. And so are there any options at all, Alistair? If an individual gets a refusal on a spousal in Canada, are there any options available for them, or do they, what do you advise your clients? If I've never had one, so what do you advise, or what would you advise? Are there any possibilities?
I've never had one either, actually. So when I do consultations and we're talking about those spousal sponsorships, this is something I always bring up because it's a very important point. If the marriage is iffy, if it's a marriage if there is any whiff that it might be a marriage of convenience, then I would advise to go the regular outside Canada's spousal sponsorship route, because then you've got that basically second kick at the can to do an appeal to the IAD, and it's a hearing de novo, which means that the adjudicator at the IAD can hear the application from scratch. They can hear witnesses. They can get testimony from all your family members. You've got another 12 to 18 months to build the relationship until you get to the IAD. So it's a very, very strong appeal process. And so what I say is, if it's just not a strong relationship, then that's the route you take. If it is a strong relationship, then go for the Inside Canada route. It's a great application. You can be together inside Canada, but you need to have the foundation of the relationship before you submit.
Yeah. And obviously one of the incentives is the open work permit when it's issued. Yeah. Obviously the pandemic has limited, has extended the length of time to actually process that open work permit, but that's one of the incentives to filing in Canada. But yeah, at the end of the day, and I know what you're getting at, Alistair, and usually when we're talking about whether or not it's a marriage of convenience or not, this is us lawyers working in our mind. Oh, this just doesn't sound like right. I think you guys should consider filing maybe outside. It's not like Alistair and I take on marriage of convenience and then try to help people to get it through when we know it's fake. Just to qualify that in case anyone's thinking. But yeah,
thank you. Yeah, we should be clear about that.
Yeah, and just to add another level, this assessment of whether I put my immigration officer hat on, and it's more an assessment of what kind of evidence do you have to prove it. Like you and your partner may feel and know subjectively that it is 100% genuine. But if you have none of the evidence that immigration is looking for, well, then that's another reason why maybe you need to consider filing through the family class. So,
yeah. And it's funny, this whole concept of a genuine marriage, it's such an immigration lawyer concept. I remember going to a CPD for family law lawyers and talking to them about this concept. And family law lawyers couldn't even understand how we have this concept of a genuine marriage. You have a marriage certificate, you have a genuine marriage. That's it.
Stop.
But no, it's a complex legal test. We've got all these different factors we need to consider. And the family law lawyers it was hysterical. This was like they were on the floor laughing about this.
Yeah, it's such a weird concept. But in a world where we have a certain level of fraud, whatever it is out there, immigration wants to make sure. And with undertakings, in a way, as twisted as it is, there's almost this feeling of, well, sometimes we want to protect the sponsor from themselves or protect someone from what we believe is a fake marriage and one person looking to dupe another. And we know that when that undertaking is signed and people land in Canada, even the Supreme Court of Canada is not too open to having people get out of that undertaking. If you signed up, you're on the hook. And so that's kind of where we're at with this with the world today. All right. Well, this is great. Well, thank you so much, Alistair, for joining me. This was a lot of fun. It was a little continuation from our appearance before the standing committee, where, except unlike here, where we have these nice viewers who are watching our live, and they're coming from both YouTube and Facebook. I haven't seen any Periscope today, but they're coming comments live. But I'll be honest, it's not much different than the MPs firing questions at us that could have come from every direction. So I thought, hey, I'll bring Alistair on, and this is just like we went through before the standing committee, right?
Except we don't have the chairperson cutting us off.
Oh,
exactly
good point.
At the time limit, right in the middle of a sentence. Your time is expired.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Clarke. I'm sorry. We have to move on. Yes. But fortunately, it wasn't just us. She's cutting off the MP. She's cutting off everybody. It didn't matter. She was indiscriminate. But yeah, their timelines were dead on. So that's great. Okay, well, let's flip over here quick. I want to point out first here, this is where you go, guys, right here to Clarke Immigration Law. If you have questions, Alistair's based in Manitoba. I am based in Alberta, but it doesn't matter where you live in the world. We are in a virtual world. And so it looks like my internet's a little bit slow today, but this is where you go to Alistair's site. The contact link is below. If you have a question, you want to get some legal representation, go there. I'll show you my site. I think all of you have already seen it here, and you can just book a consult right here at this link here. But it's been a lot of fun, Alistair. I really, really appreciate it. And yeah, I hope that this pandemic lifts and we can get back together again at one of our national conferences and go out for dinner or something that that's really missing. That I really, really miss that connection with the
Yeah.
other lawyers across the country.
Yeah, I was just chatting with a lawyer who's from Vancouver, and I haven't seen her in a while, and we were looking forward to getting together in Montreal, and of course that was all canceled, and Victoria was scheduled for 2021, and I will say as a
Oh,
UVic, that's where I did my
uh,
undergrad at UVic. I would love to get back to the
yeah.
island,
I'm so
but
looking forward to that.
I don't know if that's gonna happen.
Yeah, yeah, it's
But
looking
Mark,
really, really unlikely, especially with the cases. Alberta's never had more lockdown. Manitoba, you're kind of locked down now as well, right? And so it's
well,
just
we have two cases in my office.
really
Actually had,
wow.
yeah, I had a staff person who can't work at all. So he's not working at all. And then I have another staff person. Her brother tested positive, then her sister,
Mhm.
then her parents, and then she
Yep.
tested positive. So
Wow.
she has no symptoms, but she's working
Yeah.
remotely.
Yep.
But we've taken a lot of precautions to try to
Yep.
keep people safe.
Yep.
But Manitoba, on a per capita basis, unfortunately, I think Manitoba is the worst right now,
Wow.
which is really sad.
Yeah, it's just amazing, this fire. So we're hoping that the vaccines are coming quickly and that we can lift out of this and get back to some semblance of normal. So thank you
Yeah.
so much, Alistair. It was awesome having you join me on Immigration Nation here. And thank you to all of you out there who have joined us. We have had an awesome time, and we'll see you again next Thursday, same time, 3 p.m. My guest will be Kevin Zemp, who is an immigration lawyer practicing in Calgary, a very good friend of mine. And we're going to talk all about the crazy stuff that's happening in Alberta. So thanks so much once again, Alistair. It was great to have you connected here. And
Well, thank you,
we'll
Mark.
see
This
you
is,
again
like
soon.
I said, you're a treasure, and all of your viewers out there, they should really appreciate that you're doing this. This is such a great service.
Awesome. Well, thank you. All right. Take care.
All right, bye now.